時々だね。Okay, let's start. First, for this interview, I'll use English and Japanese both, but I won't translate Victor's words. 彼は Victor さんって言うんですけど、Victor's words into Japanese because I'm not a good English translator and don't want to make misunderstanding. このインタビューでは私は自分の言葉を英語と日本語で紹介するんですけれども、ビクターさんの言葉は翻訳しません。私がいい翻訳者じゃないというか、英語がそんなに上手なわけじゃないので、自分の即興の翻訳で誤解を生むよりかは、視聴者の方にご自身で頑張って翻訳して理解していただくのがいいかなと思っています。Hallo, здравствуйте. Before I start this interview, I'm going to introduce myself. Is it okay? インタビュー始まる前に私の自己紹介簡単にさせていただきますね。Okay. I'm Ouma, Japanese contemporary artist who joined Artist in Residency at NCAA St. Petersburg, Russia in 2016. I got an email from Viktor. Viktor has been introducing Japanese artists on his media, Gendai Eye, and he asked me to tell my experience staying in Russia. 現代アーティストの大間です。よろしくお願いします。2016年にロシアのサンクトペテルブルグにある NCAA というアーティスト・イン・レジデンスのプログラムに参加したことがきっかけで、この度、ビクターさんからメールをいただいたんですね。で、ビクターさんは、現代アイっていうサイトで日本人アーティストを紹介されている方で、NCAA とか、ロシアでの体験とか、現地での発表した作品について聞かせてくださいっていう連絡をメールでいただきました。これが、インタビューの、きっかけになっています。Okay, your turn. Could you introduce yourself, please? では、ビクターさんに紹介お願いします。
はい。皆さんありがとうございます。次は、英語で話を続けます。So, my name is Victor, and I'm a Japanese artist and Japanese art researcher. Especially, my specialization is into the post-war Japanese art and also the aspects of representation of Japanese art in Russia. So, shall I turn on my presentation? Is it okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, yes, I will switch.
画面共有してくれますね。Sharing his documents. 日本語書いてあるのすごい。Great, it's Japanese.
Thank you. So, yes, I want to open it in a full window scale. All right. And yes, so here we go. So, and I started a project called Gendai Eye. I started it in 2019. So other slides are working okay. So are they switching? Can you see the difference between the slides?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
All right. So I've been thinking about how to introduce Japanese art to the general public. And I've created this mascot called Mr. Gendai, which is like a combination of like a human person and a kanji for the man. And I was thinking about how to talk about Japanese art in Russia. So I've been creating this name of this project by combining Gendai, it's like a Gendai Ato, with two kanjis and using I, like an English word for the eye, and Japanese eye. So I've been thinking about how to express the love and the interest towards the Japanese art. And I've created, I'm also just like have got some experience into the animation and drawings, digital drawings. So that's why I just like put my artistic expression into creating the visual side for this project. And later on, I've started my own blog with various articles and interviews because I was trying to think about how can we start our discussion about the Japanese contemporary art. So the reason for this was that if we're talking about the specialists in Japanese contemporary art in Russia, so there were none at the moment when I just like ended up my education at the university. And I thought of it like it was so unfair that, well, you just can't get any information about post-war Japanese art or pre-war Japanese art, because there were not so many articles about this, not books at all. So I was trying to research this site by myself, buying various books in Japan, traveling to Japan in 2017. So visiting various museums, galleries, and establishing some contacts with Japanese artists, because I was thinking about it. It's quite unfair that countries that are close to each other still do not know that much about the art of each other. So that's why the Gendai Eye project appeared. So I was posting various texts, a huge text about some aspects of Japanese art, for example, like the institutional side of Japanese art, how it developed, how, for example, the galleries at various department stores like Mitsukoshi appeared, and how the Japanese art was presented in there. And I also was thinking about some people who visited, Japanese artists who visited Russia before. So that's why I held various interviews with Japanese artists who traveled to Japan or who made some projects related to Russian or to Russian-Japanese context. And it was very interesting for me to understand their point of view, the obstacles in their way of working in Russia, or their circumstances that get them to Russia, and how they started to research the Russian culture and to express themselves in the Russian art world. And I also was thinking about how we can also speak about the Russian side of this creative exchange. And that's why I've been talking to various Russian curators who somehow at some points of our institutional history were included into the exhibition process or into the communication with Japanese artists. So for now, it's just about 50 articles had appeared on my project. And I also, while if we're talking about the interview side of it, I've created both lingual versions. So the one is in Russian, the one is, and another one is in English. So you just actually have a very many-sided aspects of how to read interview if you are not speaking Russian. But on the other side, this kind of conversation became very difficult since the war started. So it's always a very hard question for many art historians, art researchers in Russia right now, because we do not understand how to speak about art in general like we used to during the war, because it's just a question of ethics and the question of our moral side, because we do think that we have to keep our research, we have to keep up with our work. But on the other side, we are quite hesitant about what can we do in this situation. So that is why after this project had appeared, as it also had got some sideways of developing Gendai Eye, a Telegram channel. It's like an open blog. So I've got about 600 subscribers in there. So it's like an everyday post about Japanese art, about what exhibitions can you visit in Japan in various cities, or what exhibitions of Japanese artists are happening in Russia. And the other side was podcasts. It was a very new format for me, and I was into this audio editing and how to create those podcasts. But since the war broke out, I just was very hard for me to keep up with this project, because I thought about it it's not entertaining, it's mostly educational, but still during these times it was emotionally hard for me to continue this work. So for now it's just frozen, but I hope that even if at the time then this war went, so I will continue this project. So in February, when the war started, I was thinking about how can we deliver the message to people in all of the world, not only Russian people, Ukrainian people, but also to express ourselves that we are, that we want a peaceful country, not included into the war activities. And so certainly we are against this war activities. So I've created this letter campaign, 平和のために手紙 campaign, Letters for Peace. And from the end of the February till the end of the March, we've gathered about 100 letters from various artists in Japan, most of them not professional like amateur artists, and also the geographical sphere of this campaign was very huge because there were a lot of artists from Germany, from London, from United States, Japanese artists are all over the world, and it was very interesting to hear them out. And it was very important for me to hold this type of communication because people got many questions. And I was just like repeating the information, telling what's happening in Russia, so how we are feeling, what is happening in the museums and galleries in Russia. So for me, it was quite an effective way to tell this story, tell what's happening, and also to give people some hope because I've got a lot of messages from subscribers of Gendai Eye who were very glad to read those messages because they were happy that some people in Japan or in any other countries, so they care about the situation. It was very important for me. And so one of the last essays was called Stolen Time and Historical Empathy. And it was just like my full experience about what's happening right now in Russia. So it was published in the middle of the March. Later on, since the letter campaign has stopped, because well, just like this energy, because you can't talk about the war activities for the whole time, and people at some point they got tired. I've started another project called Sign of the Times. It's a series of interviews with various artists, and I was really interested in the Japanese experience of artists who work with the subject of war and memory and trauma. And this is why I've reached artists who work with these subjects like Aisuke Kondo, Kitazawa Jun, Fujihikaru, Yoshinori Niwa. So we were trying to talk about this subject and try to understand how art can deal with the memory and what is the point of art in memorizing the war, or how can we just like form our attitude towards it. This project is ongoing because, well, I still got some artists left who work with the subject, but well, we just like takes time at some point, and well, we just like started in April and it's ongoing right now. And the last project that I'm currently involved in, and this is like a part of Gendai Eye, and on the part is like an independent project. It's a research laboratory called J100R, and it's devoted to the study of Japanese contemporary art in Russia. What kind of exhibitions, what kind of artists were invited at some point in Russia or the USSR. And this is also an ongoing project that I've been curating for 4 years. And since the June of 2022, it's under the research laboratory of the Garage Contemporary Art Museum in Moscow. For me, it's a very important topic and it's very actual. And at this point, I was thinking, if we're talking about Gendai Eye and simple or common talk about the Japanese art, I was like, as I said, it was really hard for me to continue with this project because I was thinking about how it is ethically right or correct to talk about this subject during the war. But if we're talking about this Japanese laboratory, I think it's very important because it helps us to understand the cultural ties between two countries and how the political or ideological process are influencing on our relationship with each other. So that is why the history of exhibitions or a single artist who went to Russia or USSR since 1920, so since early Taisho and later Showa Jidai to nowadays, it's very important and it's very problematic talk while we concerning the project of how the Japanese contemporary art was presented and was perceived by professional art historians or common public. And this is like to tell a difference between how the realistic part of art that was like basically quite positive involved and quite positive appreciation in the USSR And if we are talking about some other groups like abstract art, like美術研究家, so how it was badly perceived in USA due to ideological aspects of the policy. So this is why to show the difference between two histories of art and how art was presented in USA and later and how it influenced on the contemporary Russian art scene and in the aspects of presenting Japanese art. And it also involved not only on the exhibitions, but also on the communication ties that appeared between Japanese or Soviet or Russian artists like Iri and Toshiko Maruki, who were deeply involved with Soviet artists in 50s and 60s, and also like pro-Italian art and various text critics that were involved with telling about Japanese contemporary art. So this kind of a big archive that I'm dealing with and collecting right now to complete my research. And I really hope that at some point, this research will be resulted in a book that will be devoted to these pages of the history, because it's a very big story. I think it deserves to be published and mentioned because, well, there are very many stories that have to be remembered because there are a lot of forces involved in this situation. So this is about my project, and this is all about the Gendai Eye project. But well, certainly the big deal right now is just like that I also left Russia since the mobilization was started in September. And it was like a very hard decision because at some point I've got my relatives, my family, my friends, my work in Moscow. But on the other side, I've always, since the war started out, it was like a very heavy feeling to be under pressure because you always read those news that are not good at all, that they're just like bloody aspects of war and how Russian government is suppressing its people. It was like really hard, emotional day by day to get up, read those news. And so, because well, at some point you just like don't understand what to do. And on the other hand, the censorship that appeared in Russia is also just like very suppressing, even in museums and galleries. So there were some exhibitions closed because of their political meaning. Some artists were criticized for their works. So the whole like environment became quite alien. And this alienation towards art and towards culture is very hard for me to perceive. But at some point, I do think that we always have to keep up with our work because we are all involved into cultural aspects of our work, like artists, art historians, simple historians. So we all involved into investigation of our relationship. And I think it's our duty as a cultural workers to protect the knowledge about our culture and to protect the ties, not just like between governments, but between people. And in this case, I do think that I continue my work, and it's very important for me to continue my work at least as I can. Right now, I'm in Kazakhstan, which is a country right in below of Russia. The life is quite different in here if we're comparing it to Russia, but at some point it's quite similar due to some daily aspects of life. But you always like, you've become some sort of not a refugee or immigrant, because I do not like this type of word, because I think that if we're speaking about the so-called title of a refugee, it's for me, it's quite unfair to put it on myself because I do not feel that I'm a refugee, because there are many cases of people who are in much terrible and difficult situation. And there are many people who left Russia with no money, and the situation for them is much harder. If we're talking about Ukrainian refugees in Europe, so the situation is quite drastically different because their houses were robbed, their houses were bombed and destroyed. They lost some of their relatives, friends. So I do not feel that I've got much conscience and bravery to name myself as a refugee, because it just like was my own choice to leave Russia, at least for some period of time. So currently I'm just like planning to travel between different countries because as a foreigner, I've got only 19 days in Kazakhstan, so I have to leave it in December at the later on, like in 23rd of December. So this is why for me it's always been now a problem to understand where should I go next. So it's just like, as I like jokingly naming it as an Aitai War vacation. So it's a part of like sarcasm, and at the same point, it's a sad reality of life that we are currently involved in. But yes, I do got some plans, even concerning the visit to Japan. So I've been trying to connect with some of my friends, and at least for some months to spend some time in Japan, because I do think that it will have a very positive effect on the research and the ability to talk about what I'm doing and to present this information to Japanese public. So this is like a short story of what I've been feeling and dealing with for the past month since the war broke out. So Ouma-san, I would like to hear your questions regarding my situations if you want to ask something.
I have some questions. あと、聞いてくれてる方も、なんかコメントとか質問あれば、なんか言っていただいて大丈夫です。I couldn't understand very well about your project Letter for Peace. This is for only by Japanese artists or foreign artists joined the project? 日本のアーティストだけがその平和のための手紙に参加したのか、ちょっと他の国の人も、外国人アーティストさんも参加したのかっていうのがちょっとわからなかったので、聞いてみました。Could you understand my questions?
I had some trouble with the internet connection, so I just like hear you, but very abruptive. So can you repeat the question if it is possible?
Oh, of course. You did the project Letter for Peace. I want to understand a little bit more. The project is only by Japanese artists or foreign artists join the project?
I do think that if we're talking about my personal interest in Japan, it was just like for me a very sudden and at some point a complex combination of events. Why I choose the subject of Japanese contemporary art as my own specialization. But for me, it was just like it started at the university when I was taught as an art historian, and I was thinking about what kind of subject should I choose to research. And maybe it's just like a way of a research to find your own subject. And for me, like this first step of experience was the connection with Kudai Bijitsu Kyokai, which I really adored about like maybe 7 years ago. And I was really into understanding what they were doing at that point in 50s and 60s. But later on, I've started to read many books about Japanese contemporary art, post-war art, and seeing various artworks, subscribing to various galleries and museums, and started to tracking those kind of information because it was really interesting for me to understand how it is working. And so this is how my interest towards Japanese art, Japanese contemporary art, and Japanese artists appeared. And on the other side, my interest to talk about this subject and to deliver this subject to Russian audience is just like was some kind of a product that was released from my knowledge, because it's at the beginning I was thinking, oh, I do not know that much about Japanese contemporary art, so I didn't have the right to talk about it. But through the years, I've gained some experience, and I thought that yes, at this point, I can share my experience with the Russian audience. So this is the reason why this educational project appeared.
そうだな。私はちょっと聞いてみたいのは、彼がもうすぐカザフスタンを出ないってといけないっていう状態なので、で、ロシアのビザって、なんか結構、日本のビザほどあっちこっちに結構行けなかった気がするんですよね。なので、制限も結構多い状態じゃないかなと思うんですけれども、I think you can't come into Japan without visa, right? 私がロシアから日本に行った時には、日本からロシアに行った時には、ビザ取らないとそもそもロシアには入れなかったので、逆も同じなんじゃないかなと思ったんですけど、聞こえてるかな？聞こえてないかも。はい。違う質問しよう。OK. Another question? Can you hear me?
聞こえません。
聞こえません。やばい。やばい。OK. Maybe we should wait.
Oh, right now? Yes, right now I can hear you. Yes,
Oh,
聞こえます。
What is your hope in the future? なんか未来にどうなってほしいかを聞いてみます。Your hope.
はいはいはい。大変な質問です。Yes. So it's a very hard question for me because I do not want to give some false hope for me and for my future or future of Russia, how it will develop, because we do not, even now, since like since months from the beginning of war, we don't know how it will end and what are the consequences of this war. But I do want to keep up with this hope inside of me because I really want to go back to Russia to continue my work in there. And I really want to hope that my family will be okay in there. But I do not know the terms and like the time, how many time it will take to this war to end and how can we live after this war? So this is a question that I'm asking myself quite often. And I was trying to understand can I do with my future? Because, well, at some point you can't move from one country to another and later on, because at some point you have to stop in some like place because, well, you need to understand that this place is your home or, well, just like you need some time to relax and to think about your future. So this is like a problem right now. But I do think that I really hope that this won't last forever. And at some point, this war will end. And the people who started this war will go for some military tribunal or something, because they are responsible for this violence against people, against women, children. And it's like, this is also like a very huge ethical questions, how these things happened in Russia, even though the USSR period over, but still there are some ambitions to conquer some pointless lands, and I do not really understand how it helps current situation in Russia if you just like add some new territories to your own country. I think that this time is not actual for now. It's not actual for 21st century. And regarding the connection between Russia and Japan, I also do think that at some point we will be able to reconstruct those relationships and to solve our questions regarding those northern territories or Purio Islands. It is a very like a weak point in Japan-Russia cultural, diplomatic and cultural relationships. And because we also got many pages of history that are not so publicly visible to Russian and Japan community. I'm talking about like Japanese internee camps in Siberia, where people from Japan were held after the war. So there are a lot of artists and poets and writers who were held in these camps, and they express their experience in drawings or in literature. And I think we have to keep on talking about these subjects. So, like, as a result of my hopes for future, I would like to keep up with what I'm doing because I think it's important. It's important to keep up because with this hope in me. And I really hope that this war will end at some point.
I think this is also a very hard question, but so if you don't want to tell anything, that's okay. And I'd like to know about the young culture, Russian young culture, and your recommendation food or something. And I'd like to know Russian culture or something changed after war starts or something like that. 日本語で説明すると、私の質問は、ロシアの若者の文化とかカルチャーとかを聞きたいんですけれども、さらにそれが今の戦争が始まってから何か変化があったかどうかを質問しました。
I think that if we're talking about youth culture in Russia, I think since the war broke out in February, it's suffering from a huge pressure, a huge censorship pressure regarding museums, galleries, what young artists are doing with their artworks. Because since the February, there are many artists who are trying to express themselves in art regarding the situation with war, censorship. And I think Russian government or Russian Ministry of Culture is trying to suppress those initiatives coming from young artists. It's like really sad because this generation is somehow very independent and very differs from Soviet generation or early post-Soviet generation. But at this point, it's really suppressed, especially if we are talking about, like, I don't know if you read about this in the news, but for example, right now, in Russia, they had this law that is directed against the LGBT community, LGBT artists who are involved into some subjects of queer identity. So you just could be basically get not into jail right now, but you should pay some like a huge amount of money if you are dealing with LGBT propagandas. So they are calling it like this. But I do think that current generation in Russia is very capable of expressing themselves towards the peace. And if we are looking at social polls that are currently held in Russia, so regarding the attitude towards the war, the youth from 18 to 25 years, so they are mostly against the war because they do not want to lose their youth period of life to go to the war and die in there. But I do think that young people, especially if we're talking about some educational aspects like schools, universities, we can also see that propaganda or some censorship is appearing in schools and in universities. There is also a problem for youth because they are just like trying to fight against this propaganda, but they get into like a very hard situation because they have to understand who they are in the like period of youth and what they wanted to be, how to choose their education, how to choose their work, but they have to fight against some kind of a propaganda. But I do feel that there is a potential in this generation if this war will end, as this generation will be able to reconstruct or to remodel the current representation of Russia in world space.
あとね、ちょっとすごく聞いてみたいのは、このすごいハードな状況で ちょっととても私は彼の状況っていうのは全然想像つかないんですけれども、どうしたらなんかせめて気持ちだけでも楽になるのだろうかみたいのを聞いてみたいなと思っているんですけど、めちゃくちゃ英語にするの難しいな、どうしよう。I'm wondering, how I can help you mentally or think because I know you have so much pressure, so and I can't, it's impossible to imagine your situation, but it happens in Japan too. I don't know, but uh, if a North Korean
Yes.
do something, it happens suddenly. Uh, I don't know at the time how I can handle it or anything. So it's really hard situation. But I like to know how we can help each other, or especially mentally. Um, uh, if you feel a little bit relaxed, even this situation, when you feel like that.
Yes, I do understand also your situation or the situation with youth in Japan because of North Korea or the situation with China and Taiwan. But well, there's also like our situation is quite different in the point that it is our country who started the war. So this is a very hard for us because we are part of this like large community, large national community. We're thinking how could our government or our country started the war? So we are keep questioning ourselves, is it our guilt or is it our responsibility? For me, it's really hard because I'm only 26 years old. So I was born in 1996. So I was about 3 or 4 years old when Putin was elected as a president of Russia. So I think that at this point, I couldn't do anything at all to just like stop this. I was quite young, quite small and quite young. But I think the reason why we especially held in this interview and talking with each other, because I think that the communication is saving us from those broken ties. Even in our situation, we are talking with each other and trying to understand what we think, what we feel. And I do believe that this kind of empathy towards each other is really important right now. And we have to keep up with this communication, like talking about our feelings, about what's happening, because it's like the real point for us to survive through this. Because if we wouldn't be able to hold these conversations, we'll be isolated. Also, like not only cultural or nationally, but in the human sense, because we have to keep this communication. It's for me, it's like a main point why I'm still doing those interviews or I'm talking to you, because I think we just like need to hold up those kind of conversations right now.
なんかありますか？ご質問とか、周りの方。Any questions? 難しいよね。なんか何を聞いたら、傷つけないのかなっていうのがもうわからないよね。Do you have any question to me?
Well, for me, it's very interesting how this situation with war between Russia and Ukraine, what people in general, I mean, not some media, not news or newspapers, but what people in general think about it right now, since it's about 8 months since the war has started. So what people are thinking about this war in December of 2022.
あれ、今質問だったかな？わかんなかったので、ちょっと。Could you repeat your question again?
Yes. So what people in Japan think about this war in December right now? So
It's really hard. Because I can't be represent all Japanese people.
Maybe about artistic community of artists, artistic community, art world.
Art world. そうだな。I don't know. Maybe just ordinary. Some people do some action, but some people do just ordinary work, keep working like that. And also, this is very sensitive, and I'm not a political artist, so I'm worried about care about because I called myself contemporary artist. I feel some kind of duty, but I wonder how I can deal with this project or make art, because I don't want to make any conflict like you, same as you. So I don't want to make any misunderstanding. So it's really hard to make art, because if I make anything, some people think too much, or some people do misunderstanding. So that's why it's really hard. But this conversation is really good. I can't tell this is artwork, but this is very meaning for me, at least for me, to understand you and yourself. I don't know about all Russian people, of course, but at least I like to know the reality, some kind of reality, because I joined some artists in residency in Korea or China. Before I joined the residency, I was a little bit nervous because Japan and South Korea and Japan and China, a little bit not very good relationship sometimes. So I thought, and I watched this TV program said some people criticize Japan and ban up Japanese flag, or I watched some kind of little なんだろうな。なんかメディアで、テレビのメディアとかだと極端なことがextreme thing. So I watched the TV sometimes only the extreme thing. So I worry about too much, and maybe Chinese people doesn't like Japanese, and all South Korean people doesn't like Japanese, or I really worry about that. But reality is really different. So I joined South Korea for total 9 months, and they are very kind and very relaxed, and some people can speak Japanese, and they said to me in Japanese, even in 2018, at the time, Japan and South Korea had a really bad relationship. Somebody said it's the worst ever. But even so, they said, I love Japan in Japanese to me, and I understand South Korean people is very strong. They express themselves, or なんだろうな、意見をすごく言うんですよね。韓国の人たちは人々がすごくすごい。なので、それで日本が大好きだって言ってる意見とかを、私はめちゃくちゃ日韓関係が明けてたあれ出た2018年に韓国で聞いたりとかしました。もちろん、I saw some banner, Japanese boycott, product boycott or something, but also I felt so many Korean people care about me, so no problem, you have no, なんだろう、罪がないよみたいな。That's not your responsibility or like that. So I can't tell it's all experience of, but I know a little bit some, not only not through TV program. So I like to know the reality about you and your feeling, or so that's why I asked you to the interview. So, ロシアの人、I have a Russian friend and a Ukrainian friend, and I know the very nice experience in Russia. But also, I understand this situation is very tough. But also, I like to know the some kind of reality, not through TV program. そうですね。なんか、リアリティをちょっと知りたいなと思って、テレビで聞いているだけだとすごく極端な情報ばっかり聞こえてしまうので、そうじゃなくて、もちろん全員のすべてのロシア人がどうこうとか、すべてのロシアがどうこうっていうわけではなくて、彼個人の、でも彼個人の本当にリアルな部分っていうのをちょっと知りたいなと思っていて、このインタビューをお願いしたっていう感じです。
And may I ask you, while you were talking about South Korea and China, so you saw some news and like had a very emotional feeling towards it. So before you go to Russia, so what kind of a feeling or expectations have you got before you?
Before I joined the residency, I already traveled Russia for 1 week. It was just an interview tour. So Russian government and the Russian tourist company took care of me lots. So it's super great experience because the 5-star hotels, always 5 stars hotels and free breakfast and just sit down the bus and go to the nice place and always eat a great thing and that's that. そう、ロシアにレジデンス行く前にですね、ソチのオリンピックの取材とかで1週間ぐらいロシアにいたことがあったんですね。モスクワとソチに行ったんですけど、それはなんか政府と旅行会社の招待ツアーみたいな感じだったので、もうめちゃくちゃいいホテルに毎日一人で泊まって、すごくいいご飯を3食食べまくって、なんかバスに乗ってるだけで、なんかどこにでも連れてってくれるみたいな、すごい最高の旅だったので、全然嫌な思い出ないんですね。いいことだったので、それが最初の旅でした。はい。And also, I really like the life in Kronstadt. なんだっけ Kronstadt. Have you ever been to Kronstadt?
Yes.
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 It was really small island. So
Yes.
it was really nice experience for me because I really like the all new experience. And the island is before the Navy place. なんかね、軍港だったんですよね、クロンシュタットが。1990年ぐらいに、Open for Public、それからなんか、普通の人たちが住み始めて、結構ね、廃墟とかがすごく多い島なんですけど、なんかね、その暮らしがね、すごい、なかなかない暮らしができたので、面白かったんです。And from residency to the nearby big Moscow, it was World Heritage. And that's not very nice walking. So after I woke up and just walking around here from my apartment to the World Heritage, very close, just 5 minutes walk. そう、ね、歩いて5分か10分ぐらいのとこに、すっごい美しいね、世界遺産のね、総院があって、なんか起きて、ふわってこの総院まで行くかって、すごいめちゃくちゃ寒いの中で行ったりとかして、なんかね、すごい楽しかったですよ。And I was really surprised. Russian people like camping, even under 0 degree. It was because for me, camping is very in summer thing. So
Yes.
water clothes and just a tea seat and enjoy maybe beer or sausage but in April, even in April, so Russian staff asked me, okay, go to camping today. So, really, it's so So cold, yeah. But we go together, and I was really surprised. Already, so many people enjoy camping. そう、コートをね、こう、着込んでね、すごいね、キャンプをね、寒い中で楽しむんですよね、ロシアの人はね。その時0度以下みたいな感じなんだったんですけど、めちゃくちゃ楽しかったです。And also, I joined the latest in April. April is very important in Russia, right? Because Gagarin, you have a, you, 宇宙ってなんて言うんだ ?Space, Outer Space Day?
Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah, in April. そう、宇宙に行った最初の人がガガーリンですよね。ロシアの宇宙飛行士の。なので、4月にね、宇宙デーがあるんですよね。宇宙デーの日にユーリ・ガガーリンのなんかね、TV 特集がね、すごいあるんですね。So we can watch the history of Yuri Gagarin in April. So it was very special, and I like to know such kind of culture. So I enjoy the thing. すごい楽しかった。そういうのを知れたのも、そう4月に別に日本は宇宙を祝わないので、そういうのをね、知れるのはすごい好きでしたね。
I also got one question. I'm really interested. So, ベクランドの動物は誰ですか？
こいつですか？黄色いやつ。Thank you. スパシーバ、スパシーバ。すごい嬉しいな。This is ミジンコ。My partner. ミジンコ。
美しいです。
ありがとうございます。ありがとうございます。よかった、ミジンコにめちゃくちゃ嬉しいな。Can you call him ミジンコ？ミジンコって言ってほしい。ミジンコ。
Yes. ミジンコ。はい。
ありがとうございます。外国人のミジンコっていう発音がね、ちょっとね、ミジンコってなってて好きなんですけど、ちょっとちゃんとミジンコって言ってくれましたね、今ね。はい、嬉しいです。はい。なんか、質問あったりしますか皆さん。なんか質問してほしいよ。桜の皆さん。My friend told me, Victor, she likes your smile.
ありがとうございま
Your
す。
smile is very nice. ありがとう。あさこさん。ちょっとごめんなさい。撮ってるのにありがとうございます。はい。そうだな。So this is the last question. What is the most happiest memory of you? 一番幸せな記憶を聞いてみたいです。In your life, most happiest memory in your life.
It's a hard question, really. But, well, for me, I do feel that the happiest time of my life, I do not want to think that all those happiest times were somewhere in the past. So I always hope that these happiest days are still to come in the future. So I'm not trying to choose someone like the best of them. So I'm still hoping that in future I will have an opportunity to spend those happiest days, happiest moments of my life in future, not right now. So I just like I will live on and try to see what's going to happen next.
Okay, almost 1 hour, so we're gonna close. But thank you, スパシーバ for this なんだろうこの時間 for this conversation. If you wanna chatting with me, so anytime we can chat. So not an interview, not a serious interview, just chatting ordinary life or tired, just talk with a friend, like with friend.
I will be happy to. And I do hope that at some point we will see each other in Japan. It will be a very like a great event for me.
Of course, I really like Asakusa, so if you can come to Japan and Tokyo, so I can show around. 浅草を案内する
Will
ぞ。
be great.
大好きな浅草を。ありがとう。
Thank you
スパ
so
シー
much.
バー。
はい、
Thank
あ
you.
りがとうございます。
皆さん来てくださった方もありがとうございました。
また明日。
またね。止まります。